Thank you so much for such kind words. I'm really happy you enjoyed this one and found it different. That means a lot to me. I truly appreciate you listening and supporting the channel, and I'm so glad you found your way here. More stories are definitely coming. A guttural snarl reverberated through the hollow trunk, a sound so deep and resonant it vibrated through her teeth, threatening to shatter her composure. She could hear it pawing at the opening, its claws scraping against the rough wood, testing the barrier. Its heavy breathing, ragged and hot, filled the confined space, mingling with the terrifying scent of its decay. It knew she was in there. It was just a matter of time. This is what freedom tastes like, she thought, a bitter, ironic laugh catching in her throat. Cold, desperate, and hunted, she closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe, to think. Her hunting knife felt impossibly small in her trembling hand. It was a last resort, a suicide mission against a creature of this size and power. But she wouldn't go down without a fight. She was Darian's mate once. She had learned from the best, even if he hadn't fully appreciated the depth of her learning. He saw her loyalty as optional, but her strength, her resilience, was forged in the fire of their shared life. That wasn't optional, it was intrinsic. The creature's growls intensified, a low rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Its clawed paw tore a larger chunk from the hollow, exposing a sliver of its glowing eye. Rhea stared into that malevolent green, a cold dread washing over her. It wasn't just mindless hunger. There was intelligence there, a dark, calculating patience. It was toying with her. Suddenly, the air outside shifted. The beast let out a frustrated, enraged snarl, not directed at Rhea, but at something unseen beyond the oak. Its heavy paws thumped away from the tree. Rhea pressed her ear against the splintered wood, straining to hear. The growls continued, now accompanied by a deeper, more resonant sound that sent a different kind of shiver down her spine. It was a howl, a wolf's howl, but not the corrupted, twisted sound of the beast she faced. This was a pure, powerful, utterly dominant alpha howl. It was a sound she knew intimately, a sound that had once been her anchor, her reassurance in the darkest nights. Darian. The name echoed in her mind, a desperate, forbidden hope. No, it couldn't be. She had left him, had severed their bond. He wouldn't be here, not in these forbidden territories, so far from his kingdom. But the howl was unmistakable. It was Darian's unique signature, a primal declaration of his presence, his power, his territorial claim. It was the sound that had made other wolves tremble, that had solidified his reign. A fierce, guttural battle cry erupted outside, followed by the crashing sounds of two massive bodies colliding. The ground trembled. Rhea could hear savage snarls, the tearing of flesh, the heavy thud of impact. The air outside grew thick with the scent of wolf, raw and powerful, mingling with the sickening sweetness of the corrupted beast's decay. Her human fear warred with a primal instinct to emerge, to see, to help. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred, a faint flicker of recognition, a ghost of a growl echoing deep within her. The bond, which she had meticulously tried to sever, now pulsed, a faint, insistent thrum beneath her skin. It was pulling wrong as Darian would have felt it when she left, but now it was pulling her. The battle raged, a symphony of destruction in the moonlit forest. She heard a roar of pure, untamed fury. Darian's roar, a sound that had always promised safety, command, and an impossible devotion. She felt a surge of something akin to relief, mixed with a bitter resentment. He was here. He had found her. But why? And what would he say? Would he see her as a traitor, a runaway? Or would he, for once, truly see the depth of what she had given and what she had taken away? A final agonizing shriek tore through the night, followed by a sickening thud. Then silence. A profound, unnatural silence, broken only by the ragged, heavy breathing of a single powerful wolf. Rhea pushed herself forward, her hands shaking, her heart hammering. She peered through the narrow opening, desperate for a glimpse. A colossal dark form stood in the clearing, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. It was unmistakably a wolf, massive and powerfully built, its fur the color of obsidian, its eyes glowing with an intense molten gold. It stood over the mangled, unmoving form of the corrupted beast, its head held high, chest heaving. Blood matted its fur, not just from the defeated creature, but from its own wounds, glistening darkly in the moonlight. This was Darien, in his primal, untamed form, the Alpha King personified. He turned his head slowly, his golden eyes sweeping the clearing, assessing the aftermath. And then his gaze, sharp and piercing, landed on the hollowed oak. Rhea froze, her breath caught in her throat. Those eyes, so familiar, so intensely powerful, fixed on her hiding place. There was no mistaking the recognition, the raw, unbridled emotion that flared in their depths. It was anger, yes, a searing, palpable rage, but beneath it, a flicker of something else, something she hadn't seen in years, something that looked like relief, and perhaps a question, a demand. His presence filled the clearing, a primal force. He had found her. And the silence she had cultivated, the carefully constructed walls around her heart, were about to crumble under the weight of his impossible, undeniable return. He took a single deliberate step towards the oak, his golden eyes never leaving her hidden form, the ghost of her choice now staring back at her in the form of a furious, blood-soaked Alpha King. The Alpha King, in his obsidian wolf form, stood motionless in the clearing, a colossal shadow against the moon's pale glow. His molten gold eyes, piercing and ancient, were fixed on the hollowed oak, on her. Rhea could feel the intensity of that gaze, even through the thick bark. A primal force that vibrated in her very bones, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of Darien's presence. Here, in this wild, untamed corner of the world, there was no regal silence, only the raw, guttural promise of violence and an undeniable magnetic pull. Her carefully constructed peace, her grim determination splintered under the weight of his impossible, undeniable return. He took another deliberate step, his massive paws crunching on the frozen leaves and shattered ice, each movement radiating an unyielding power. The lingering scent of the corrupted beast, a sickening sweetness, was rapidly being overwhelmed by Darien's own intoxicating aroma. Wood smoke, frost, and the rich, musky tang of an alpha male, laced now with the coppery scent of fresh blood. It was the scent of home, of protection, of the man she had loved and left, and it was almost unbearable in its familiarity. Her dormant wolf stirred, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor deep within her, a ghost of a growl echoing where once a chorus of welcome would have erupted. Even now, after all she had done, after all she had endured, it remembered him. It yearned. Darien reached the oak, his massive head lowering, his golden gaze unwavering. He sniffed at the raw, splintered edges of the opening, his hot breath ghosting over her face, carrying the scent of triumph and battle. He didn't growl, didn't paw at the wood. He simply waited, his silent presence more terrifying, more demanding than any roar. It was the patience of a predator who knew its prey was cornered, the unwavering confidence of a king who expected obedience. Rhea pressed herself deeper into the cold, damp hollow, her knuckles white around the hilt of her hunting knife. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the quiet authority of his breath. She felt a surge of defiance, hot and sharp. She had made her choice. She wouldn't cower, she wouldn't apologize. Not for seeking a loyalty that was more than optional. Then, with a fluid grace that belied his immense size, Darien began to shift. The transformation was always awe-inspiring, a visceral reminder of their primal nature. Muscle rippled, bones cracked and reformed. Fur receded, replaced by smooth, scarred skin. The air around him shimmered, distorting the moonlight, as the great black wolf dissolved into the powerful form of the Alpha King. He stood naked, unashamed, his body a testament to countless battles, each scar a story etched into his bronze skin. His hair, dark as midnight, fell around his shoulders, still wild and untamed. His golden eyes, now human, blazed with the same raw intensity, the same mixture of fury and something else, something akin to relief, that she had seen in his wolf form. He knelt, his powerful frame filling the opening, blocking out what little moonlight penetrated the hollow. His face, usually carved into lines of regal authority, was grim, set. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken accusations, with the weight of her departure, with the terror she had just faced. His gaze swept over her, taking in her mud-stained clothes, the scratches on her skin, the weariness etched around her eyes. For a fleeting moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern, perhaps, or a deep, possessive anger that she had put herself in such danger. "Rhea," he finally rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly sound that resonated deep within her chest, a voice she hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. It was laced with a dangerous edge, a barely suppressed fury, yet it held a timbre of profound familiarity that made her ache. "What in the name of the moon goddess are you doing out here?" His question, blunt and demanding, shattered the fragile composure she had meticulously rebuilt. "What does it look like, Darian?" she retorted, her voice raspy, a little shaky, but firm. "I'm living my life, away from yours." His jaw tightened, a muscle clenching visibly. He reached in, his hand large and powerful, brushing against her arm. It wasn't a gentle touch, but it wasn't overtly aggressive either. It was a claiming, a possessive gesture that sent a jolt, an unwelcome spark through her veins. Her dormant wolf stirred again, a confused whine echoing in the depths of her consciousness. "Mate." She flinched away, pulling her arm back sharply. "Don't touch me," she whispered, the words ragged, tearing at her throat. "That ended when you decided loyalty was optional." A low growl, distinctly human this time, vibrated from his chest. "Optional?" he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You think I felt anything but a gaping, bleeding hole since you left? You think this," he gestured vaguely at the mangled beast, "is where you belong? Hunted and alone?" His eyes burned, a firestorm of emotion. "I felt the bond fray, Rhea. I felt it tear. I felt the silence you left behind. It nearly broke me." The raw honesty in his voice, the unexpected vulnerability caught her off guard. She had expected anger, accusation, perhaps even indifference. But not this. Not the confession of pain. She swallowed, her throat tight. "You dismissed it, Darian. You dismissed me. My loyalty wasn't optional, it was constant. And you treated it like a given, like something you were owed, not something I chose to give you every single day." Her own voice rose, infused with years of pent-up hurt and quiet resentment. "You said strong bonds didn't need limits. I agreed, but you never considered that the limits were on your understanding of what a bond truly entails. You never considered that the one who believed in it might stop choosing you." His golden eyes narrowed, searching hers. He didn't deny her words, which was more shocking than any argument. Instead, a shadow of something akin to shame, or perhaps dawning realization, flickered across his face. "I was wrong," he admitted, the words wrenched from him, heavy and uncharacteristic. "I see that now, the hollow. It's been an ache, a constant phantom limb." He reached for her again, slowly this time, his fingers tracing the scar on her cheekbone, the one she'd gotten fighting beside him. "I looked for you, Rhea. My entire pack has been searching, tearing through every territory. I tracked you for days, following the faint echo of our bond, the one you tried to sever. It was a whisper, a ghost, but it was there." His thumb brushed lightly over her lips. "I thought you were dead. Or worse." The gentle touch, the admission of his search, the fear in his voice. It was a potent cocktail that threatened to unravel her carefully constructed defenses. She wanted to lean into it, to surrender to the familiar comfort of his touch, to the unspoken promise of his protection. But the memory of his casual dismissal, the long years of feeling unvalued, held her captive. "You felt it pulling wrong," she echoed, her voice barely a whisper, remembering the premise of her departure. Only when it was gone, only then. He pulled his hand back, his jaw tight once more. "Yes," he conceded, his eyes burning with a renewed intensity. "Because I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool, but I'm here now, and you are coming home." His tone was no longer pleading, no longer vulnerable. It was the Alpha King speaking, an order, an unquestionable command. The mask of regret had slipped, revealing the dominant male beneath. Rhea stared at him, her own defiance hardening. He hadn't changed, not truly. He understood his loss, but not necessarily her reason. He saw her as something he had misplaced, not someone who had chosen her own path. No, she said, shaking her head slowly. I'm not. My home is here now, wherever I choose it to be. Darian's eyes flashed, his pupils dilating, a dangerous glint in their golden depths. He stood up, his massive frame radiating raw power, and looked down at her, trapped in the hollow. The air in the small space grew thick with tension, with the clash of two unyielding wills. He was not asking, he was commanding, and she, the self-exiled Omega, had dared to refuse her Alpha King. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken threats. He reached into the hollow with both hands, not to hurt her, but to pull her out, to reclaim what he believed was his. His fingers wrapped around her arms, strong and inescapable. As he began to draw her forward, a faint, almost invisible mark on her inner wrist, the ancient forgotten mark of their bond, pulsed with a soft, warm light, a desperate, silent plea from her own wolf. The light was faint, almost a trick of the moonlight, but Darian saw it. His grip faltered, his eyes widening as he stared at the faint glow, a symbol of a connection he thought severed, a primal echo of a loyalty he had declared optional. His gaze snapped back to hers. A new question, a new conflict, burning in their depths. The faint ethereal glow on Rhea's inner wrist, an almost invisible pulse of light from the ancient mark of their bond, momentarily froze Darian. His powerful hands, which had been drawing her inexorably from the hollow, faltered. His golden eyes, filled moments ago with a dangerous blend of fury and possessive intent, now widened, staring at the soft luminescence. It was a silent testament to a connection he believed she had shattered, a primal echo of a loyalty he had so carelessly dismissed as optional. The air in the confined space of the hollowed oak crackled with a new tension, a profound shift from confrontation to a stunned, almost sacred revelation. Rhea felt the mark burn, a soft internal fire that spread through her veins, a stark betrayal of her carefully constructed detachment. Her dormant wolf, which had been a silent, suffering observer, now stirred with a desperate, resonant whine, a plea that echoed through her very soul. It was a yearning for the bond, for the mate, for the warmth and protection that Darian's presence now offered. The dichotomy was agonizing. Her human will demanded freedom, demanded independence, while her wolf cried for home, for the primal connection she had so deliberately severed. The shame of that internal conflict was a bitter taste in her mouth. Darian released her arms, his hands dropping to his sides, though he remained kneeling, blocking her exit. His gaze, however, was no longer directed at her with anger or command, but with a raw, almost bewildered intensity at the faint light on her wrist. "The mark," he breathed, his voice a low, rough murmur, stripped of its alpha authority, tinged with disbelief. "It's still there. You tried to hide it." His fingers, calloused and strong, reached out slowly, tentatively, to brush against the pulsing skin. A shiver, not of cold, but of primal recognition, traced a path down Rhea's spine at his touch. The mark flared brighter under his thumb, a tiny beacon in the oppressive darkness of the hollow. "I thought it would fade," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, a confession wrenched from her. "I willed it to. I thought, if I took away my loyalty, the bond would finally break. That's what you said. Loyalty is optional. And if it was optional, then its absence should erase the mark, shouldn't it?" Her eyes, wide and luminous in the dim light, met his, reflecting the pain of her desperate gamble. Darian flinched, as if her words were physical blows. He pulled his hand back, his face etched with a complex mixture of guilt and a dawning, terrible understanding. "I was a fool," he repeated, the words tasting like ash. "A truly monumental fool." He looked away, his gaze sweeping over the mangled remains of the corrupted beast in the clearing, then to the vast, indifferent forest. "I never understood what you truly gave me, Rhea. I saw the pack's loyalty as a collective strength, a consequence of my rule. I saw yours as a given, as something inherent, unwavering, needing no tending. I never considered it was a choice you made, every single day, with every beat of your heart." His voice grew quiet, almost mournful. And then the hollow, the silence. It wasn't just a loss of a mate. It was like losing a part of my own soul. I didn't understand why until now. He turned back to her, his golden eyes filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You silenced your wolf," he observed, his gaze moving over her face, searching, delving deep. "That's why I couldn't track you more easily. Why the bond was only a whisper, a ghost. You forced it dormant." Rhea nodded, unable to deny it. The shame burned anew. "I had to survive, to make the choice absolute, to free myself from a bond that felt unvalued." She swallowed, forcing herself to meet his piercing gaze. "Every day I chose you, Darian. I chose your pack, your vision, your future. And every day, it felt like it went unnoticed, unappreciated. Your strength was a shield, but it also cast a shadow where my own loyalty, my own quiet power, became invisible." He reached for her again, this time with a deliberate slowness, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over the scar, a gesture of profound familiarity, yet imbued with a new tenderness. "Invisible to me, he corrected, his voice thick with emotion. "But not to the pack, not entirely. They felt your absence, Rhea. There's been a disquiet since you left, a tension. Even my most loyal alphas, they felt the imbalance. They sensed a piece of their king was missing, that his heart was not whole, and they knew it was because of you." His words were a revelation. To think that her absence had caused such a ripple effect, that her quiet presence had held such an intrinsic value, not just to him, but to the entire pack, was astonishing. She had always felt herself merely a shadow, an echo. "They did," she whispered, vulnerability cracking her voice. "Yes," he confirmed, his gaze unwavering. "More than I realized. I was too wrapped in my own arrogance, my own perception of strength. I believed my dominance was enough. But a king needs more than just loyalty born of fear or respect for power. He needs loyalty born of love. And you taught me that, in your leaving." He leaned closer, his scent enveloping her, a potent mix of wildness and aching regret. "I have not slept truly since you left. Every shadow, every distant howl, I thought it was you, in danger, or gone forever." The raw honesty, the admission of sleepless nights and gnawing fear, chipped away at her resolve. This wasn't the arrogant alpha king who had dismissed her. This was Darian, vulnerable, burdened, lost. The man she had loved, stripped bare of his casual indifference. His eyes, molten gold, were filled with a profound sadness, a desperate longing that mirrored the awakening ache in her own heart. "What do you want, Darian?" she asked, her voice trembling, dangerously close to breaking. He didn't hesitate. His grip on her cheek tightened gently, his thumb caressing the sensitive skin. "I want you back," he stated, his voice a low rumble, devoid of command, filled only with an urgent, desperate plea. "I want to earn your loyalty again, to earn your choice, to make you see that I understand now, that I know the difference between what is given freely and what is merely taken. I need you, Rhea. My king's heart is hollow without you, and my wolf, it grieves." His words hung in the cold, damp air, a confession that tore at the very fabric of her resistance. He needed her, not as a symbol, not as a convenience, but as the essential other half of his soul. The weight of his admission, the genuine pain in his eyes, was almost overwhelming. She had wanted him to understand, to see, to feel the imbalance. Now he did. But the path back, if there was one, was fraught with the ghosts of past hurts. She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of the old casualness, the easy dismissal, but there was only raw vulnerability, a fierce, protective longing, and a humility she had never expected to see in the Alpha King. He had come for her, tracked her, fought for her. He had admitted his mistakes, his profound regret. The bond mark on her wrist pulsed rhythmically, mirroring the frantic beat of her own heart. Her wolf stirred again, a soft whimper, a longing that was almost irresistible. Just as she was about to speak, to voice the tumultuous question swirling in her mind, a new scent hit her. Faint but growing rapidly. Not the corrupted beast's decay, nor Darian's powerful alpha scent. This was human, several humans, and the metallic tang of something else, something familiar and dangerous. Silver. A hunter's scent. Darian's head snapped up, his golden eyes narrowing, instantly alert. The tenderness in his gaze hardened, replaced by the familiar, lethal focus of the Alpha King. His nostrils flared, scenting the air. "Hunters," he growled, a low, dangerous sound emanating from deep within his chest. "And not just any hunters. These are old blood. The ones who don't respect territory, only trophies." He moved, pulling back from the hollow, his body tensing, instantly ready for battle. "They're tracking the scent of the corrupted one. And now they've scented me. And you." He glanced back at her, his golden eyes flashing with renewed urgency. "There's no time, Rhea. We have to move, now, before they box us in." He extended his hand, not with a command, but with a desperate, unspoken plea, a desperate choice. "Come with me. Trust me, just this once." The bond mark on her wrist pulsed fiercely, a warm throb. Her wolf cried out, a silent, desperate affirmation. The hunters were closing in, their presence a palpable threat. She had sought freedom, but now she faced a choice. The known danger of the wilderness, or the complicated, perilous safety of the king, who had finally, agonizingly, understood her worth. She hesitated, her hand hovering over his, the sound of snapping twigs growing louder, closer, signaling their imminent discovery. The snapping of twigs grew louder, closer, a relentless drumbeat against the silence of the forest. The scent of human hunters, sharp and acrid, mingled with the metallic tang of silver, pressing in from all sides. Darian's golden eyes, no longer softened by confession or vulnerability, were ablaze with a fierce, protective urgency. He stood poised, his powerful frame radiating raw, untamed strength, a shield against the encroaching threat. His extended hand, however, remained a silent plea, a desperate choice offered without command. Rhea stared at it, her own hand hovering, trembling. Her mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The fear of the hunters was immediate, visceral, a cold dread that seized her lungs. But beneath it, a deeper current churned. The memory of her long-held pain, the quiet shame of feeling unvalued, the fierce pride that had driven her into this perilous solitude. Yet the bond mark on her wrist pulsed with an insistent throb, a silent, desperate cry from her wolf. It was a cry for safety, yes, but also for connection, for the mate it had grieved for the one who now stood before her, finally seeing her. "Rhea!" Darian's voice was a low growl, laced with an urgency that brokered no argument. "They're almost here. We don't have time for this." His gaze flickered to her eyes, then back to her hesitant hand. "Please, trust me. Trust." The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history, with promises broken and rebuilt. But this wasn't about the past, not right now. It was about the present, about survival. The primal instinct to live, to fight, to protect, surged through her, and in that moment she knew, with an undeniable certainty, that Darian, despite their fractured bond, despite his past failings, was the only chance she had against the encroaching hunters. He was the Alpha King, a force of nature, and right now she needed that force. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, Rhea reached out, her fingers brushing against his. His grip was immediate, strong, enveloping her hand, pulling her from the hollowed oak with a swift, decisive motion. The contact sent a jolt through her, a familiar current of power that resonated deep within her dormant wolf, causing it to stir with a faint, almost imperceptible purr of recognition. For a fleeting second, the world narrowed to the warmth of his hand, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. No sooner had she emerged than Darian shifted. The air exploded with energy, bones grinding, muscle expanding, fur erupting. In a blink, the man was gone, replaced by the colossal black wolf, a magnificent, terrifying creature of legend. He was even larger than she remembered, his frame radiating an almost tangible aura of dominance and raw power. He lowered his massive head, nudging her roughly but gently towards the deeper shadows of the forest. His golden eyes, blazing with an unholy intensity, conveyed a single stark command. "Run, stay close." Rhea didn't hesitate. She plunged into the thick undergrowth, Darian a silent, massive shadow at her side. He moved with an incredible grace for his size, his movements fluid and silent, a stark contrast to the heavy-footed approach of the human hunters. He was her shield, her guide, her protector. The familiar rhythm of running alongside him, even in this desperate flight, brought an unexpected sense of comfort, a primal reassurance that reverberated through her weary bones. The hunters were close. She could hear their hushed commands, the faint clinking of their gear, the heavy tread of their boots. Their scent, now closer, was laced with an aggressive intent, a bloodlust that prickled her skin. Darian let out a low, guttural growl, a rumble that vibrated through the earth, a silent warning to his mate, a primal challenge to their pursuers. He nudged her again, pushing her deeper into a tangle of thorny bushes, a natural barrier. Suddenly, a silver-tipped arrow whizzed past, burying itself in a tree trunk just inches from Rhea's head. The air hummed with the lethal precision of its flight. Darian snarled, a terrifying sound that made the very ground tremble. He pivoted, a black blur of fury, placing his massive body between her and the direction of the shot. Another arrow, then another, pierced the night, aimed squarely at him. He moved with astonishing speed, dodging one, taking the impact of another on his thick shoulder. A low whine, a sound of pain, escaped his throat, but he didn't falter. He stood firm, a living wall, absorbing the blows meant for her. The image of him taking the arrow for her, without hesitation, without question, burned itself into her mind. It was a silent vow, a fierce declaration of loyalty that transcended his earlier, casual dismissal. This was the Alpha King, yes, but this was also Darian, the man who had loved her, the mate whose bond she had tried to break. He was fighting for her, bleeding for her, proving with every desperate breath that her worth was not optional, but essential. "Stay here," Darian communicated through a series of low growls and nudges, his eyes blazing, a silent command that resonated with the awakening wolf within her. Then with a roar that tore through the night, he launched himself toward the source of the arrows, a dark primal force of vengeance. The forest erupted into chaos. Howls, snarls, the shouts of men, the clang of weapons against bone and fur. Rhea huddled in the thorny thicket, listening, her heart in her throat. She could hear Darian fighting, a furious whirlwind of teeth and claws, his snarls punctuated by the cries of the hunters. He was outnumbered, but he was Darian, the Alpha King, and his fury was a formidable weapon. She felt utterly useless, trapped, her human form a frustrating cage. Her wolf, stirred awake by Darian's presence and the imminent danger, clawed at the inside of her skin, desperate to break free, to join the fray, to protect its mate, but the self-imposed silence held, a cruel punishment. She had denied it the strength of the bond, and now it denied her its power. The agony of that internal struggle was almost as debilitating as the fear of the hunters. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sounds of battle began to recede, moving deeper into the forest, Darian drawing the hunters away from her. His howls became more distant, though no less fierce. A desperate hope flickered within her. He was leading them away. He was protecting her, but then a new sound cut through the night. A series of sharp rhythmic whistles. It was a hunter's signal, a call to regroup, to flank. They were trying to surround him. They were trying to corner the king. Rhea's blood ran cold. She couldn't stay here. Not while Darian fought alone, outnumbered, wounded. Her loyalty, once optional in his eyes, was now an unshakable core of her being. She couldn't abandon him, not when he had finally, truly understood its worth. With a surge of renewed determination, she pushed through the thorns, ignoring the fresh scratches on her skin. She had no wolf, no superhuman strength, but she had her wits, her training, and her hunting knife. And she had a desperate, fierce love that refused to let him face this alone. She followed the fading sounds of battle, moving as silently as she could, relying on her heightened senses. The forest floor was churned earth, broken branches, and the lingering scent of Darian's blood, fresh and potent. It spurred her on, a painful reminder of his sacrifice. She found them in a small clearing, surrounded by ancient, moss-covered boulders. 3 hunters, heavily armed with silver-tipped spears and bows, had Darian cornered. He was magnificent, a creature of primal fury, but he was bleeding, a silver arrow protruding from his flank, another shallow wound on his leg. He was snarling, snapping, tearing at the air, but they were skilled, coordinated, slowly closing the net. One of the hunters, a burly man with cold, calculating eyes, raised his silver-tipped spear, aiming for Darian's exposed throat. Time seemed to slow. Rhea saw the attack unfold, felt a primal scream tear through her. Her wolf, for the first time since her departure, surged, a raw, undeniable burst of power, breaking through the silent prison she had built. It wasn't a full shift, not yet, but it was a flood of adrenaline, of heightened senses, of fierce, protective rage. Without thinking, Rhea launched herself forward, a desperate cry tearing from her lips. "Darian!" The hunter, startled by her sudden appearance, hesitated for a split second. It was all she needed. She moved like a shadow, low to the ground, her small hunting knife a glint of moonlight in her hand. She aimed for the most vulnerable point she could reach, the back of his knee, and struck. The hunter cried out, collapsing with a guttural roar of pain, his spear clattering to the ground. Darian, his golden eyes wide with shock and a sudden fierce pride, saw his opening. With a renewed surge of strength, he lunged, tearing into the exposed hunter with a savage ferocity, ending the threat decisively. The other two hunters, momentarily stunned by Rhea's sudden suicidal attack, recovered quickly. One raised his bow, the other a spear, both now aimed at her, the smaller, more vulnerable target. "Run, Rhea!" Darian snarled, his voice raw with fury and desperation, his body already moving to intercept. But she didn't run. She stood her ground, her small knife held defensively, her heart hammering. She met the hunter's gazes, no longer just an omega, but a warrior, a mate defending her king. The bond mark on her wrist flared, a brilliant golden light, no longer faint, but radiating with an undeniable power, mirroring the fierce protective surge of her wolf. The silence was broken, the choice was made, and in that moment, as the hunters charged, she knew she had reclaimed not just her strength, but her place. Darian, seeing the blazing mark, the fierce light in her eyes, let out a howl of pure, untamed triumph, a sound that echoed through the ancient forest, claiming her, claiming their bond, claiming his mate in the face of impossible odds. Darian's howl of triumph, raw and untamed, tore through the ancient forest, a primal declaration that echoed the fierce, golden light blazing from Rhea's wrist. The sound was a fusion of victory and possessive rage, a king claiming his mate, a wolf reclaiming its lost bond. The two remaining hunters, momentarily stunned by Rhea's sudden, suicidal attack and the Alpha King's furious response, recovered with brutal efficiency. One, a wiry man with a cruel sneer, lunged with his silver-tipped spear, aiming for Rhea's heart. The other, an archer, swiftly drew an arrow, its fletching whispering a death song as it flew towards her. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing eternity. Rhea stood her ground, her small hunting knife feeling impossibly inadequate, yet her eyes blazed with a defiance born of rediscovered purpose. Her wolf, no longer dormant, surged through her veins, a torrent of raw, untamed power. It wasn't a full shift, not yet, but it was a primal awakening, a flood of adrenaline that sharpened her senses to an almost unbearable degree. The metallic tang of silver, the stench of fear from the hunters, the rich, musky scent of Darian's blood, all assaulted her with blinding clarity. She felt the whisper of the spear's tip against the air, the faint hiss of the arrow, and understood, with chilling precision, the trajectory of both. Then Darian was there, a black blur of fury, a force of nature. He intercepted the archer's arrow with a snap of his powerful jaws, splintering the shaft to kindling. With a guttural snarl, he slammed into the spear-wielding hunter, sending the man sprawling. The impact was bone-shattering, a testament to the Alpha King's immense power. Darian didn't hesitate. His teeth, gleaming white in the moonlight, found the hunter's throat, and with a sickening crunch, the threat was neutralized. The forest fell silent once more, save for the ragged breathing of Darian, the terrified gasps of the remaining archer, and the frantic thumping of Rhea's own heart. The archer, wide-eyed with terror, dropped his bow. He stared first at his fallen comrades, then at the blood-soaked Alpha King, and finally his gaze, bewildered and horrified, landed on Rhea, on the fiercely glowing mark on her wrist. He had never seen such a thing. A mate mark blazing with such potent ancient power was a legend, a myth whispered in hushed tones around hunters' fires. He had been told these wolves were weakened, their bonds frayed. He had been lied to, Darien, his fur matted with blood, some his own, some the hunter's, turned his golden eyes, filled with a lethal coldness, towards the remaining man. He was a creature of myth, larger than life, a primal force of vengeance and protection. The archer whimpered, stumbling backward, tripping over a gnarled root. "No," Rhea said, her voice raspy but firm, stepping forward, placing herself deliberately between Darien and the cowering hunter. Darien paused, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his wolf instincts screaming for the kill. But he held, his golden eyes flicking to Rhea, a silent question passing between them. She looked at the hunter, then at Darien. "He's no threat now. Let him go. Let him carry the message." Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, met the hunter's. "Tell your people what you saw here tonight. Tell them the Kestrel King is not weakened. Tell them his mate walks beside him, and her loyalty is no longer optional. Tell them the old bonds run deeper than any silver." The hunter, seeing the unwavering resolve in her eyes, the fierce light of the bond mark, scrambled to his feet, fear lending him unnatural speed. He didn't look back, disappearing into the shadows like a terrified phantom. Darien watched him go, then slowly turned back to Rhea. The bloodlust in his golden eyes began to recede, replaced by an intensity that was almost overwhelming. He began to shift, the transformation slow, deliberate, as if he wanted her to witness every agonizing moment. Muscle rippled, fur receded, bone cracked and reformed. The majestic black wolf dissolved into the powerful, scarred form of the Alpha King. He stood naked, magnificent, his chest heaving, his dark hair wild around his shoulders. Blood stained his powerful body, glistening in the moonlight. A silver arrow, snapped short, still protruded from his flank, a dark stain spreading around it. He took a step towards her, then another, until he stood directly before her. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently cupped her face. His thumb brushed over the glowing mark on her wrist, still radiating a soft, warm light. "My mate," he whispered, his voice hoarse, raw with emotion. "You chose me. You saved me." The words were a profound admission, a revelation that echoed the depths of his transformed understanding. Rhea leaned into his touch, her eyes brimming. The dam she had built around her emotions, around her wolf, had finally burst. The years of quiet suffering, of feeling unseen, unvalued, melted away under the fierce intensity of his gaze, under the undeniable proof of his love. "I never stopped choosing you, Darien," she confessed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I just needed you to choose me back, to see me, not as an optional loyalty, but as an essential part of your world." His eyes, golden and luminous, searched hers, filled with a regret so profound it twisted her heart. "I see you, Rhea. I see you now, clearly, and I will spend every remaining day proving it to you. My strength, it was never complete without yours. My kingdom, it was always hollow without its queen." He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, holding her against his blood-stained chest. She felt the warmth of his skin, the powerful beat of his heart against hers, a rhythm that spoke of home, of belonging, of a bond reforged in fire. The pain from his wound was evident in the tremor of his muscles, but he held her tight, as if afraid she would vanish again. "We need to get you healed," Rhea murmured, her hand reaching for the arrow in his flank. "Silver," Darien shook his head, pressing his forehead against hers. "Later, just hold me. Let me feel you. Let me feel this." His voice was raw, vulnerable, a plea that tore at her heart. The scent of pine and his unique, powerful musk filled her senses, intoxicating and deeply comforting. The connection, once severed, now pulsed with renewed vigor, vibrating through every fiber of her being. Her wolf, fully awake now, howled its joy deep within her, a silent song of reunion. They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other amidst the scattered wreckage of the battle, beneath the indifferent gaze of the moon. The forest, which had been a place of terror and exile, now felt like a sanctuary, a witness to their impossible reunion. The bond between them, tested by absence and betrayal, had not only mended, but had been reforged, stronger and deeper than before. Finally, Darien pulled back slightly, his golden eyes still locked on hers, filled with an emotion so potent it stole her breath. "Come home with me, Rhea," he whispered, his voice husky. "Not just to the palace, but to my heart. Be my queen. Be my mate truly, in every way. Let us rebuild what I nearly destroyed." It wasn't a command, but an offering, a profound request that acknowledged her autonomy, her choice. The choice he had finally, truly learned to respect. Rhea's heart swelled with a mixture of love, relief, and a fierce, unyielding joy. She looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had always loved, finally, truly, understanding the depths of her devotion. "Yes," she breathed, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Darian, I will, but first—" She reached for the silver arrow embedded in his flank. "We need to get this out." He winced, but nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Always practical, my Rhea." He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. "It will be painful, but I will endure. For you, for us," as she braced herself to extract the poisoned shaft. A new sound, faint but distinct, reached them through the still night air. It was a distant, mournful howl, unlike any wolf call she had ever heard from Darian's territories. It was old, burdened with ancient sorrow, and carried a chilling undercurrent of despair. It was not a call of hunting or challenge or even grief. It was a lament, a warning. Darian's eyes snapped open, his golden gaze instantly alert, wiping away the tenderness that had softened his features. His head tilted, listening. The howl came again, closer this time, and Rhea felt a tremor of unease. It was a sound that spoke of a deep, pervasive evil, a sorrow so profound it threatened to consume. "What was that?" Rhea whispered, her hand freezing on the arrow. Darian's jaw tightened. "Whispers of the old blood," he rumbled, his voice grave, his eyes darkening with a distant, ancient fear. "A warning. My pack, even in their search for you, has encountered anomalies, dark omens. This is something far older, far more dangerous than just hunters." He looked at her, his expression grim. "Our reunion, it seems, has drawn more than just attention. It has awakened something ancient, something that hungers." The mournful howl rose again, closer still, echoing through the forest, a chilling prelude to an unseen, insidious threat that now shadowed their fragile reunion. The mournful howl, ancient and heavy with a despair that resonated deep within Rhea's bones, echoed through the quiet forest, chasing away the fragile peace of their reunion. It was a sound unlike any she had heard, a lament that spoke of ages past, of a darkness stirring from a long slumber. Darian's golden eyes, which had just moments ago softened with tenderness and relief, now hardened, taking on the fierce, distant gleam of an alpha facing an existential threat. His jaw tightened, the lines of his face carved with grim determination. "What was that?" Rhea whispered again, her hand still hovering over the silver arrow embedded in his flank, the warmth of the bond mark on her wrist chilling slightly in the face of this new, unseen danger. Darian shook his head, his gaze sweeping the shadowy trees as if expecting the source of the sound to materialize. "Whispers of the old blood," he rumbled, his voice low and grave. "It's a legend, mostly. Tales told around ancient fires, of a blight that rises when the great packs falter, when the primal bonds weaken. A corruption that feeds on discord, on fear, on the very unraveling of our kind." He looked at her, his expression grim. "My pack, even in their desperate search for you, has encountered anomalies, dark omens, corrupted prey. This is something far older, far more insidious than just hunters. This is what happens when a king lets his focus waver, when he dismisses the very foundation of his strength." His gaze flickered to her wrist, to the bond mark that still pulsed faintly, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. "It preys on the hollow spaces, Rhea, the ones I created." The weight of his words, the raw admission of his own culpability, hung heavy in the air. He wasn't just acknowledging his past blindness, he was connecting it directly to this burgeoning threat. It was a new kind of humility from the Alpha King, one born of desperate necessity. "We need to get this out," Rhea said, her voice firm, pushing away the larger dread to focus on the immediate, tangible threat of the silver. She knelt, her fingers brushing against the cold, poisoned shaft. Darian braced himself, his muscles tensing, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Hold still," she commanded, her gaze meeting his, a shared understanding passing between them. This was not merely an act of healing, it was an act of profound trust, a physical manifestation of their reforged bond. With a swift, decisive pull, she yanked the arrow free. Darian cried out, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the night, his body arching with pain. Blood, dark and thick, welled from the wound, steaming slightly in the cold air. Silver burned like acid in the veins of their kind, its poison spreading rapidly. Rhea immediately began to press down on the wound, staunching the flow. Her knowledge of medicinal herbs and wolf anatomy, learned during countless years by Darian's side, kicking in. She tore a strip of fabric from her tunic, wrapping it tightly around his flank. "We need to move," she said, her hands working quickly, efficiently. "The silver will slow your healing. We need to find shelter, and I need to find herbs. And we need to get back to your territory. This old blood." It sounds like something that requires the strength of a united pack, not just a king and his mate on the run. Darian nodded, his breath still ragged, but his golden eyes burned with renewed purpose. He watched her, a fierce light in his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of her competence, her strength, her foresight. "You're right," he rasped, pushing himself to his feet, swaying slightly. "Stonefall. It's an ancient gathering place on the edge of my territory, and our territory. A natural fortress. If the old blood is truly awakening, that's where they'll make their presence known first. That's where we make our stand." He began to shift, the transformation slow and arduous due to the silver's poison, but he pushed through it with sheer force of will. He needed his wolf form to move quickly, to protect her. As the massive black wolf solidified, he nudged her gently but insistently with his nose, urging her to climb onto his back. It was a gesture of trust, of complete reliance, an intimacy he had not offered since their bond had frayed. Rhea climbed on, settling into the thick fur behind his powerful shoulders, her arms wrapping around his neck. The warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heart, was a stark contrast to the chilling threat that now loomed. They moved through the forest, a silent, grim procession. Darian, despite his wound, moved with impressive speed, his senses constantly alert. Rhea, perched on his back, scanned the shadows, her human eyes straining to catch any movement, her ears attuned to every rustle. The forest felt different now, infused with a subtle, pervasive dread. The air grew heavier, colder, and the natural sounds of the night, the hoot of an owl, the scurry of a mouse, were eerily absent. They passed through a small abandoned hunter's camp, the fire long dead, the tents ripped and shredded as if by a massive unseen force. A primal scent of fear and decay hung heavy in the air, a chilling testament to the old blood's passage. Darian snarled, a low guttural sound, his golden eyes blazing with fury. "They're moving closer to my borders," he growled, his voice a vibration through his powerful chest. Preying on the weak, expanding their influence. As they pressed on, Rhea noticed other disturbing signs. Trees with their bark stripped, not by animals, but by something that had carved strange ancient symbols into the exposed wood. Small game animals, usually skittish, lay dead by the path, their bodies untouched, but their eyes wide with a terror that seemed to linger even in death. This was not a natural predator. This was something that consumed souls, leaving only empty husks. "What exactly is the old blood?" Rhea asked, her voice low. Darian paused, his head cocked, listening to the oppressive silence. "It's not a pack, not a species," he finally responded, his voice grave. "It's a corruption, a parasitic entity. Legends say it was banished eons ago, sealed away by the first alphas when they forged the primal bonds. It feeds on discord, on severed connections, on the very despair of wolves who feel abandoned by their mates, by their packs, by the moon itself. Your departure, Rhea, the hollow you left, it created an opening, a weakness it could exploit. A cold knot formed in Rhea's stomach. Her choice, born of hurt and self-preservation, had inadvertently opened a door to an ancient evil. The guilt was a heavy cloak, but Darian's hand, strong and reassuring, covered hers as she gripped his fur. He knew, he understood, and he wasn't blaming her. He was accepting their shared burden. They rode through the rest of the night, Darian pushing his wounded body to its limits. Just as dawn began to paint the eastern sky in hues of bruised purple and gray, They reached the edge of a vast, desolate plain. In the center, rising like a jagged tooth from the earth, was Stonefall, a massive ancient rock formation, ringed by a scattering of smaller, weather-beaten stones. It was a place of power, a place where the veil between worlds felt thin, a place hallowed by generations of wolves. But this morning, Stonefall was not serene. A dark, pulsating energy emanated from it, a sickly green aura visible even in the dim light. The air tasted metallic, charged with a malevolent hum, and at the base of the central monolith, amidst the smaller stones, a gathering of figures stirred. Not wolves, not human hunters. These were twisted, grotesque parodies of their kind, shadows given flesh, their forms indistinct, their eyes glowing with the same eerie green as the corrupted beast Darien had slain. They were chanting, a low, guttural murmur that resonated with the mournful howl they had heard, a sound that chilled Rhea to the bone. "The reckoning," Darien growled, his voice vibrating with a primal fury. He stopped abruptly at the edge of the plain, his body tensing, his injured flank trembling. "They're drawing power. They're trying to break the ancient seals, to unleash the full force of the old blood." He turned his head slightly, his golden eyes meeting Rhea's. "This is it, Rhea, our fight. For our bond, for our pack, for the very world." Rhea slid from his back, landing softly on the cold earth. Her human body felt small, vulnerable, but her wolf was fully awake now, a roaring fire in her chest. The bond mark on her wrist blazed with a fierce, unwavering golden light, mirroring the intensity in Darien's eyes. He stood beside her, a magnificent, wounded king, his black fur bristling, his fangs bared in a silent snarl of defiance. The chanting at Stonefall intensified, a rising crescendo of dark energy. One of the shadowy figures, larger and more defined than the others, turned its head. Its eyes, burning emeralds, locked onto Darien and Rhea. It raised a gnarled, clawed hand, pointing directly at them. The chanting stopped. A chilling silence descended upon the plain, broken only by the cold wind whistling through the ancient stones. "They're here for us," Rhea whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "No," Darien corrected, his gaze fixed on the malevolent figure, a deep, resonant growl rumbling in his chest. "They're here for what we represent. A bond renewed, a king and his queen standing united. The very thing they fear most." He looked at her, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce, protective love. "Are you ready, my Rhea?" She met his gaze, her heart filled with a courage she hadn't known she possessed, a strength born of their shared connection. "I am," she replied, gripping her small hunting knife, the bond mark on her wrist a searing testament to her unwavering loyalty. Together, they took a step forward, two figures against an ancient rising darkness, ready to face the impossible. The shadowy figures at Stonefall began to move, their forms coalescing, their malevolent eyes fixed on the two wolves who dared to defy the old blood. The final battle for their world was about to begin. The dawn that broke over Stonefall was not the gentle, bruised purple of a new day, but a furious explosion of molten gold, mirroring the light that now radiated from Rhea's bond mark. The ancient stones, once shrouded in malevolent green energy, now pulsed with a clean, raw power, cleansed by the ferocity of their defiance. The reckoning had been brutal, a maelstrom of primal fury against ancient darkness. Darien, even wounded, had fought with the strength of a legend, a blur of black fur and flashing fangs, protecting Rhea with every fiber of his being. But it was Rhea, her wolf finally unleashed in a torrent of protective rage, who had truly turned the tide. She hadn't fully shifted, not in the traditional sense, but the power of her reawakened wolf had flowed through her human form, lending her impossible speed, unholy strength, and an instinctive understanding of the old blood's weaknesses. Her small hunting knife, imbued with the light of her bond, had pierced the shadowy forms where Darien's raw power could not, severing the corrupted energy that held them together. Together, a king and his queen, a mated pair reforged in the fires of battle, they had driven back the encroaching darkness, sealing the ancient blight once more beneath the hallowed ground of Stonefall. The last of the shadowy figures had dissolved into dust, leaving behind only the scent of ash and a lingering echo of despair. Now, weeks later, the physical wounds had largely healed, but the scars remained, etched not just on their bodies, but on their souls. Darian, standing beside Rhea on the sun-drenched balcony of the Kestrel Palace, still bore the faint silvery line on his flank where the arrow had struck. Rhea, though outwardly untouched, carried the indelible memory of the terror, the fight, and the profound, undeniable power of their united bond. The palace itself, once a place of subtle disquiet in her absence, now hummed with a vibrant, palpable energy. The pack, having rallied to their Alpha King's side once news of the old bloods rising and Rhea's return spread, had fought valiantly, their loyalty unwavering, their respect for their queen now absolute. Her wolf, once a silent, suffering observer, now thrived within her, a constant, comforting presence. It was no longer dormant, no longer quiet. It purred with contentment when Darian's hand found hers, when his gaze sought hers across a crowded hall, when his scent enveloped her in the quiet solitude of their chambers. It was a wolf rebirthed, a primal force of love and protection that was now celebrated, not hidden. Darian, the Alpha King, had changed. The arrogance that had once veiled his deeper self was gone, replaced by a profound humility, a quiet strength that resonated with true leadership. He no longer spoke of loyalty as optional, but as the very bedrock of his kingdom, a sacred trust to be nurtured and earned. He sought Rhea's counsel on all matters, his golden eyes filled not just with love, but with genuine respect for her wisdom, her quiet power, her unwavering moral compass. He saw her, truly saw her, not as his shadow, but as his light, his equal, his essential other half. Their bond, once a frayed rope, was now an unbreakable tether, humming with a vibrant, life-affirming energy. It was a connection forged in the crucible of separation and rekindled in the fires of battle, stronger and deeper than it had ever been. He would often reach for her hand, his thumb tracing the now perpetually glowing mark on her wrist, a silent reminder of her choice, her return, and his agonizing realization. "You are my anchor, my heart," he would whisper, his voice raw with emotion, "and I will never again take your steadfastness for granted." Life in the Kestrel Kingdom had shifted. The pack, having witnessed the old blood's power and the unparalleled strength of their reunited alpha pair, had embraced Rhea not just as Darian's mate, but as their true queen. Her quiet resilience, her strategic mind, and the fierce protective spirit she displayed at Stonefall had earned her a reverence that transcended mere rank. The whispers that had once plagued her were gone, replaced by murmurs of admiration, by genuine respect. She moved through the palace with a confidence she had never known, her presence radiating a calm authority that complemented Darian's fiery dominance. "A penny for your thoughts, my queen?" Darian's voice, deep and resonant, pulled her gently from her reverie. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest, his chin resting on her shoulder. His scent, still a potent mix of wood smoke and frost, but now imbued with a comforting familiarity, enveloped her. Rhea leaned into his embrace, her fingers lacing with his. "Just thinking," she murmured, "of how far we've come, of the silence, and then the storm, and now, this peace." He pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "A peace hard won," he agreed, his voice thoughtful, "and one I will guard with my life. I know now, more than ever, that my strength is amplified, not diminished, by yours, by your presence, by your choice." She turned in his arms, her eyes meeting his. The golden light in his gaze was no longer shadowed by regret, but shone with a clear, unwavering love. "And I know," she replied, her own heart overflowing, "that my freedom was never truly found in walking away, but in returning to a love that finally sees me. That finally values the choice I make, every single day." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the rugged lines of his face. "So you choose me still, my Rhea," he teased gently, a hint of the old playfulness, now tempered with deep respect, in his voice. Her bond mark pulsed, a warm throb against his hand. "Always, my king," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Always." Their lips met, a tender, lingering kiss that sealed their unspoken vows, a promise of a future built on mutual respect, unwavering loyalty, and a love that had defied all odds. The sun climbed higher, bathing the kingdom in its golden light. And below them, the pack thrived, united, strong, and whole. The echoes of forever, long silent, now sang a symphony of love, power, and an unbreakable bond, resounding through the heart of the Alpha King and his queen.